Chapter 5. I stepped past the last flickering lamp, and the light simply gave up. Suddenly, it was pitch black. The air felt heavy and oppressive, like the mountain was leaning in to listen to me breathe. I had to keep one hand pressed flat against the cold stone wall just to find my way. My fingers felt the jagged grooves and old pick marks left by miners who had been here long before me. The tunnel sloped steadily downward, pulling me deeper into the dark. The ground was slick with mud and mineral runoff. My boots slipped more than once on the wet surface, the sound of sliding grit echoing in the silence. Each time I lost my footing, my stomach lurched with a sharp, cold fear. Even though I knew this was a game, the thought of skidding helplessly into a bottomless pit felt completely real. The deeper I went, the damper the air became, a creeping chill seeping through my clothes and settling into my bones. I'd never been much of an adventurer. The idea of old mines and caves had always been enough to raise goosebumps, set my imagination running in all the worst directions. Tight spaces, darkness, the weight of the earth overhead. And yet, here I was, wading deeper into it, like I'd forgotten every instinct that should have told me to turn back. My boot clipped something and I nearly stumbled, another broken lamp half crushed into the muck. A few steps later, more debris, tools, scraps, signs people had been down here, recently. A pickaxe lay half buried in the muck, the handle still intact. I pulled it free, the weight of it grounding in my hands in a way nothing else had been. Not much, but better than nothing. These villagers didn't have much. They wouldn't leave gear behind unless they had no choice. That didn't mean anything good. I pushed on, passing a fork where one tunnel dipped even deeper, the path narrowing and twisting in on itself. Somewhere behind me, the last faint glow of the lamps finally disappeared. Then my eyes adjusted. Somewhere ahead, a faint, sourless glow seeped along the stone, phosphorescent lichen smeared in streaks, or some mineral catching what little light there was. It was enough to sketch outlines, walls, floor, and the suggestion of side passages. The rock itself changed as I descended. Streaks of dull metal veined the walls, thicker and more frequent the deeper I went. In places the veins bulged out, fat and promising. I ran my hand along one, fingers bumping over the cold, raised ridges. No wonder they kept pushing down into the mine. There was enough ore here to support the whole village. The usual mine sounds had long faded away. No distant chink of picks, no murmur of voices, just me, the stone, and the faint hiss of my own breathing. Then something new joined in. At first I thought it was another rumble from deep below, like the ones Tob had mentioned, but this sound had a pattern, a slow, deliberate rhythm separated by heavy pauses. Thud. 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 Each one came with a subtle tremor under my boots, a little shiver in the wall. I stopped walking. The fear arrived in pieces, first as a prickle at the back of my neck, then as a tightening in my chest, then as a sudden, unhelpful awareness of just how alone I was. This was supposed to be a game, I reminded myself, but my body clearly hadn't got the memo. My palms were slick, my shoulders tensed on their own. "Just rocks," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. The thuds grew louder, closer, not the chaotic crunch of a cave-in, not falling debris. Each impact landed in the same place, one after another, like a giant boot hitting the ground in a steady march. Whatever it was coming up the tunnel. I shrank back against the wall. A narrow side passage opened on my left, barely more than a crack. The ceiling dipped low, and the entrance was framed by jagged rock that looked unwelcoming for shoulders and skulls alike. Perfect. I slipped into the narrow passage sideways, sucking in my stomach, then immediately realized the pickaxe and I weren't both making it through. With a silent apology to my only weapon, I let it go.
the dull thud as it hit the ground sounding far too loud for my liking. I squeezed in after it, stone scraping along my back and chest as I forced myself just deep enough to break the main tunnel's line of sight. My heart hammered, loud in my ears. I tried to make my breathing smaller, quieter. The thuds grew closer. Thud, da-dum, thud, da-dum. Dust trickled from the ceiling with each one. The main tunnel filled with a shape as whatever carried that sound came into view. At first, all I saw was movement, shadows shifting, the faint glint of light on something that wasn't ore. Then it stepped close to some glowing moss, and I finally got a look at the thing. It was a man-shaped lump of the mountain, big enough that it almost brushed the ceiling. Its body was made of squared blocks and rough boulders fused together, edges worn, but still sharp in places. Its arms, like stone pillars, swung with the slow certainty of a metronome. Its head was little more than a rounded mass, with the bare suggestion of features and two deep-set hollows where eyes should be. It walked with purpose, each step sinking into the dirt. The sound of its movement vibrated through my bones. I held my breath. If I didn't move, maybe it wouldn't. A tickle crept into my throat. Of course it did. I froze, eyes watering, trying to swallow it down like that would somehow fix everything. Nope, it got worse, sharper, insistent. My chest tightened, my lungs burning, my body very politely informing me that not breathing was, in fact, a terrible long-term strategy. Don't cough, don't cough, don't... I coughed. Not even a big one, just a small, pathetic little cough. The creature's head snapped toward me, half wedged in the side passage. The speed of it was deeply unfair for something that size, like a mountain suddenly deciding to have reflexes. For one long, awful heartbeat, those hollow, ember-lit eyes locked on mine. I stared back. "Excuse me?" I whispered. A low, grinding sound rolled out of its chest. Not a roar, more like two massive stones being dragged together. Yeah, it definitely heard me. It turned fully, tearing its bulk out of the main tunnel's center line and angling toward my hiding place. Great, it does see me. I scrambled backwards, deeper into the side passage, hands searching for purchase on stone that didn't care whether I stayed upright. The walls closed in fast. There was no room to stand properly now, only enough to half crawl, half stagger. Behind me, the golem reached the mouth of the passage and jammed one huge arm in as far as the space allowed. Stone grated against stone as it forced more of itself into the gap than should have been possible. Its fist, a solid block of rock the size of a basketball, reared back, then surged downward toward me. I threw myself sideways without thinking. The impact hit like a hammer. Stone shattered beside me, shards whistling past my face. The blast of air slammed into me, stealing my breath in a single cruel swipe. My hip and backside smacked the ground hard as I rolled, the sting immediate, but not in the way I expected. And then the sensation hit.
A heavy, blunt shock punched through me. It felt like a massive static discharge, a strange, unsettling mix of being shocked and going numb at the exact same time. It wasn't pain, not exactly, but it was still very real. A hollow, buzzing sensation vibrated through my bones, so real that my body reacted before my brain could even process the hit. My nerves were firing a warning I couldn't ignore. This world had a way of making sure I felt every mistake. I let out a string of curses. Fudge sucker, son of an inappropriate mother. Getting hurt like this was uncomfortable enough. I couldn't imagine actually taking a hit from that rock monster. My stomach clenched just thinking about it. On the other side of the narrow passage, the golem hit the wall again and again. Each blow came with a dull boom that I felt in my teeth, followed by a shower of grit that rained down on my head.
The crack I'd managed to slide through shivered under the force, but it held, at least for now. The rock creature was still there, snarling with a heavy grinding sound as it tried to force its massive bulk into the gap to get to me. There was no going back. The way was blocked by a wall of angry, animated stone. I quickly picked myself up, my hips still humming with that strange electric numbness. I had no choice but to push further into the dark. The passage was narrow and declined sharply, the ceiling dipping so low it forced me into an awkward thigh-burning half-crouch. The transition from the jagged mine passage to this place was like walking out of a cave and into a cathedral. The walls were perfectly circular and smooth, rising up into a high domed ceiling. At the very center of the room sat a massive stone pedestal with a hollow core. Around the edges stood 4 statues, refined stone versions of the creature that had chased me. Even though they were weathered, I could see they had distinct roles. One gripped a heavy stone shield, another held a long sword, and a third held a slender carved wand. The final statue was different. It held nothing at all, its empty hands reaching forward as if waiting for a gift. Veins of glowing blue ore ran through the walls like glowing spider webs. Behind the pedestal, a massive stone door remained shut, blocking the way forward. The air hummed with a low, vibrating energy that made the hair on my arms stand up. I knew no instructions were coming. If I wanted to get through that door, I had to figure it out myself. Since I'd lost my pickaxe in the scramble, I searched the floor until I found a heavy, jagged rock to use as a hammer. "Right," I muttered, my voice echoing. "Let's see how tough this wall is." I stepped up to the brightest vein and swung my rock with everything I had. The impact sent a jolt of that weird electric numbness through my arms, rattling my teeth. I let out a grunt as a chunk of the glowing ore finally cracked loose. It was heavy, nearly 50 kilograms, but I lugged it over to the first statue, the one with the shield. As I jammed the ore into the hollow slot in its chest, the golem groaned to life. Its eyes flickered with a faint blue light, and its stone joints ground together. It stayed standing, vibrating with power, but it didn't move. I repeated the process for the sword-bearer and the wand-wielder. Each one hummed to life as I slotted the ore, their stone bodies glowing with that same internal light. Finally, I reached the statue with the empty hands. I jammed the 4th chunk of ore into its chest. It awakened just like the others, standing tall and expectant. I stood back, wiping sweat from my forehead, but nothing happened. The door remained shut. The 4 statues just stood there, glowing and humming, while the central pedestal sat empty and silent. I looked at the statues, then at the pedestal. It was a classic game puzzle. 4 batteries, but only 1 socket. I decided to take the core from the last statue I had activated, the one with the empty hands. As I reached in and pulled the glowing core out of the statue, its light vanished and it went still. I carried the orb to the center of the room and placed it into the hollow core of the pedestal. The reaction was immediate. The pedestal began to hum, a deep bass note that vibrated in my chest. From across the room, the light from the other 3 statues began to bleed out, flowing across the floor like liquid electricity towards the central pedestal. As their energy was drained, the statues with the sword, shield, and wand finally crumbled into piles of gray rubble. Their energy combined inside the pedestal, all 4 cores now, forming a single brilliant orb of blue light. Beneath my feet, a mechanism began to grind. With a heavy tectonic groan, the massive stone door behind the pedestal began to slide upward. The door only opened about halfway when I noticed something. The core in the pedestal was pulsing rapidly. It was the only thing keeping the mechanism active. If I left it there, I'd be entering the next room empty-handed. My hoarder gamer sense screamed. These cores are clearly valuable, and I wasn't about to leave one behind. "Don't be a coward, Lukas," I whispered to the empty room. "It's just a bit of electric magic, right?" I reached out and snatched the combined glowing core from the pedestal and tried to bolt for the door at the same time. Big mistake. My whole body jolted instantly. A massive wave of that electric numbness surged out of the core and into me, racing through my hands, up my arms, and straight into my legs. It was like every nerve had been replaced with static. My legs went stiff as boards, and since I was already moving to the door, I tilted forward with no way to catch myself. Without my hands to break the fall, I executed a perfect 10-point face dive directly into the dirt. Because of my momentum, I didn't just hit the ground, I did a little slide through the dirt for good measure. My muscles were locked tight, and my vision swam with angry blue sparks that made it hard to see. The stone door immediately began to groan, sliding closed with a terrifying final finality. I scrambled forward, my legs still feeling like they were made of lead and wet concrete. Wriggling and rolling as the heavy stone slab descended, I barely made it, my boots clearing the gap just as the door shut with a solid, room-shaking thud. I lay there on the cold floor of the throne room, panting and shaking. My tongue felt like a thick piece of carpet in my mouth. "I think I broke my teeth," I mumbled, the words coming out as a garbled, numb mess. I let out a shaky breath, looking down at the glowing orb still clutched in my hands. I wrapped the orb in the hem of my shirt to stop the tingling in my fingers, and slowly sat up. If the last room was a puzzle room, this one was a boss room. Rows of massive stone pillars marched down either side, each as thick around as an old oak tree holding up the dark above. Between them, a wide central walkway led straight ahead, raised slightly from the rest of the floor, like a path laid down for someone important. Easily the largest space I had seen since stumbling into this place, and the sheer scale of it made my steps falter for just a moment as I tried to take it all in. My boots scraped softly against the stone floor as I pushed myself upright, the sound carrying too easily through the open space, echoing outward in a way that made it feel like I had just announced myself to something that had been waiting in the dark long before I arrived. At the far end of that path, a platform rose from the stone, broad and shallow, with steps leading up to a flat expanse that could only be one thing: a dais, a throne stage. The air and hall felt heavy, thick with expectation. "Let's just hope," I added under my breath, "that whoever this room belongs to isn't home." The silence didn't answer, but I felt like it was listening, waiting to see what I did next.